You're watching the African Nutrition Society podcast. My name is Helena. We've been discussing over the past few days school health and nutrition, and we've had high-profile nutrition experts come from all over the world detail on practical approaches to improving school health and nutrition during the first 1,000 days and also continuing up to the 8,000 days. So we have with us here Dr. Jackie Landman Boogies of Sutton. Dr. Jackie is a registered public health nutritionist. She's retired and also a visiting lecturer at the University of Southampton. Born in South Africa, she finished her education in the UK and at the University of the West Indies, Mona. She has a long-standing interest in professional education and regulation. The subject of her PhD she co-supervises, and she's been a member of an ad hoc group working on school nutrition in Africa since 2017 and a long-standing member of the ANS and Nutrition Society. You're very welcome, Mal. And finally, we've had you here.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming. What are your perspectives on the pre-conference school health and nutrition workshop that has been going on?
Yes. Well, I thought, my take home from it was a sense of the range of diverse work that's going on.
Definitely.
I thought it was interesting, particularly when we got some of the granular detail of the activities that are going on as people describe the different ways in which their countries are trying to set up and sustain school meal programs with more or less integrated aspects, and the challenges that they are overcoming, the ways in which they are trying to engage with local communities so that you have several win-wins. There's feeding the children, there's engaging the community so that women particularly are involved in feeding the children. They're doing the catering, which gives them money and saves the household, actually. That's the first thing, saves the household up to 10% of their household income is saved by having a child getting his free school meal. And then there's the community aspect. It has to be a collaboration because there has to be a contribution very often so families bring food towards the school meals. And I think it's fantastic because it has this strong commitment to development. It has ways in which it wants to encourage children of all ages to stay at school. So retain and retain and complete schooling, which is obviously important for the development of our countries. And in particular for girls, because girls are more likely to drop out, particularly when they reach adolescence and the challenges of dealing with menstrual health become a barrier. And so having the integrated programs that include better wash, which is water and sanitation and health, and in particular making sure that there is appropriate provision of separate lavatories so that girls have the privacy and know how to manage their menstrual health. So it's got so many. That's just a small part of the range of activities. Some places they also do dental and dental health. There's eye testing and hearing testing, and you can imagine, can't you, that if you have school-age children, they're all in school, it's easy to add in. I remember when I was a child being at school in South Africa, we had the school health inspector coming in. They would weigh us all and examine us. Yeah. And I remember the indignity I felt because I was a skinny child of having to get fish oil supplements, which tasted awful. But the point is that, because I was skinny, they picked me up and they said, you better have something. So I think that it's another aspect which is more of the nutrition is we want to have the opportunity to improve school children's literacy. We want them to know about what makes a healthy diet. Because if you learn something when you're a child, you remember it for life. And that means that you're able to make healthy choices throughout your adolescence and early adulthood. And hopefully we will reduce the burden of chronic diseases such as obesity, which we know is already a problem. And on the back of that, cardiovascular disease and cancers. So it has several very important wins for the individual, the family, the community, and the nation, and indeed the whole continent.
Definitely. So we see that you have a lot of experience from South Africa, the UK, the Caribbean. How have all of these shaped your perspective on school health and nutrition?
So as I've already mentioned, I have this recollection. I mean, I can still remember my school, learning at school about protein, and building healthy bones and teeth. That I remember that phrase. But I think more specifically, when I became a nutritionist, I was trained at the London School in 1971. There was the first time they had a master's program, and they were very much training nutritionists in order to go back to our own countries. And it was a touch and go whether they would let me in, because by then I was unable to go back to South Africa. And it was for countries which were in the process of developing health and nutrition. So it had a practical element. You had to think about how you were going to use what you were learning. That's one thing. And the other thing, going to the Tropical Medicine, Tropical and Metabolism Research Institute, which is where I did the master's project and where I stayed on as a lecturer, one of the things that was important for that institution was outreach. So although we had external funding, we were encouraged and actually inspected to do something useful for our community. And I can remember doing things like surveys in schools, surveys in places of safety, which are orphanages. And that is obviously important for enabling better services in those areas. And one of the worst publications I had was actually for the School of Education. They had a magazine, so I wrote an article for them. So this sense of, you reach out, you find ways of doing something that's useful for the community, that in which you're localized, or the wider community, as I now am, of the African diaspora, has been with me for a long time. I did some work when I was in Scotland. I did a piece of work on school meals, because at that time it was exactly the same thing. Poor children don't get a good enough meal.
In Scotland as well, not just Ghana.
No, not at all, not at all.
So what were the school meals like in Scotland?
Well, they have, one of our problems is that, as you know, it's the same everywhere, that if you don't have government commitment, things go by the wayside.
Right.
And there's two things. You can get a school meal, but then do you have to pay? And if you can't pay, how do you manage it? Mm-hmm. So there are ways in which they've been trying to take away the stigma of having a free school meal, to encourage those children who are eligible for them to take them up by, for example, having a digital card, so that those children who pay, they bring a card and it looks exactly the same as the card that the child was getting free school meals bring. Nobody knows how the money got there.
Okay, so those who have the free meals have different meals?
They have the same meals, but it's paid for.
Right.
So there have been, there are issues about, in some situations, you might have children bringing packed lunch to school. And one of the issues then is what is in the packed lunch. So schools also have ways in which they, then inspect and discourage, for example, too many sweets, too many crisps, that sort of thing. And depending on which government is in power, they either in favor of or they don't approve of standardization and enforcement. So in the period when we had the previous administration, they scrapped the standards, the national standards and the national schemes that were in place. So now we have a sort of, it depends on where you are, and it's a large amount of the effort is left to civil society.
Okay.
So it may change with the new government, but who knows? We will have to watch our space. So these are not issues that are unique to low-income countries. They are the same. They're the same in rich countries. I mean, I heard somebody say that in Denmark they don't have free school meals. Oh, this was such a different conference, but they don't have. So one of the when she arrived, because she was used to school meals, she set about school meals work so that she could also get school meals for her children.
Well, so with all of these experiences, what do you think are the most pressing challenges that you have encountered?
Well, you have to recall that I am retired now.
Yeah.
I've been retired twice, and the last retirement was 7 years ago.
Okay.
So my I'm not in the front line. I mean, more in the back office. But I would say that the challenges are the same as the ones that we've been touching on. There's political will.
Okay.
Without political will, you don't get the space in which people work together. If they're not required to work together, or if barriers are put in their way to work together, it's not going to happen. So it starts off with political will. The other thing is, of course, funding. The point about procurement and whether you get the money promptly, because if you rely on paying on receipt, then you're expecting your supplier to in effect, do it on credit. And that is very difficult, particularly for small-scale producers. Yeah. So I think that seems to me that is likely to be a problem for the small-scale producers that we're talking about in local communities. And it's fine and very good that we're intending to get local communities to enter the market through the mechanism of the homegrown school feeding. But unless there's this regular and prompt supply of the funding, it's not going to work. And then, of course, it has to be supported. So in fact, we've got to have a very good integration of agricultural services to enable the appropriate foods to be being grown in sufficient amount to support the main calorie content, if you like, of the grain-based or staple-based food that is in the school meal. So I think that I personally see this as being one of the most exciting things about it, because it's at its heart, it's integrating, it's intersectoral, not just multisectoral, intersectoral. And if we can do it well, we'll have community engagement, community empowerment, and I think that will be very, very good indeed. So some of the themes are familiar to my early career when we first started having, we had what I learned in the early 70s, integrated nutrition considerations across all ministries. Now that fell by the wayside, right? But now here we are without that commitment to having nutrition in all ministries, and not just at the highest level, but regional and local level as well, if it's not going to work. And I think that nutritionists, the sorts of nutritionists that I have trained and the sorts of nutritionists I encounter, we know that it's more than science, it's also about social science and the art of practice. So we learned about behavior change. We are very well placed to be in that space, talking to both the farmer, the teacher, the parents, the children, and whoever, and the health people, whoever. We're in a position that we've got so much diverse training that we're very well placed to be a person who can liaise with and keep bridge gaps between people for a common purpose. Now, I like to think that we're going to make a very good contribution as nutritionists.
You're making good progress.
I think so. I think so.
That's good to know. So as part of your final words, I know that you said you're retired, but you have had connections with the ANS, the Nutrition Society. And so how have these organizations influenced your work and also your perspectives in school nutrition? And then you round it up for us.
So what's going to be my focus for the next few months is being a member of the ad hoc group. So in the first instance, my immediate role as a member of that group is to prepare a report on the 2-day workshop to give tomorrow.
Okay.
So that's my first priority, to get that right and try to do justice to the immersion that we experience in the workshop. And then after that, we undertook to get a report, a more extensive report for everybody that takes on board, that takes on our commitment to doing more to progress the agenda of school feeding and nutrition, and come up with an action plan. So we've got work to do by the end of December. That's our first commitment. And considering how much there is, to cover, it's going to be quite significant amount of work. We've got proposals that we put to the meeting yesterday that we need to progress as well. And we're hoping that arising from this meeting, we'll have people actively seeking to engage with us and work with us. So we're hoping to establish a community of practice that will enable us to proceed. One of the things that I think has caused a certain amount of, excitement is probably one word, but some misgiving as well, is the proposal to have a school nutrition extension officer who we see as being a nutritionist of the kind that we know are already produced, but somebody who will more of whom will step into this space. I know from Professor Zotor that there are already nutritionists in Ghana who are working in schools, and we think that that's a good model for us to try and encourage other countries to share.
Right.
So that in addition to MCH work, we'd like to see more health work. We'd like to see nutritionists more actively involved in school, because they, that would be fantastic.
Ensuring the quality of the meals that gets in the diversity and quality that
yes, and also making sure that then the education is appropriate, because there are some limitations in the. I had 2017. When I went to Kigali, I said I started in 2017. When I went to Kigali in 2019. After the conference, the farmers' conference, there was a declaration that made the commitment to school meals, right? And so I think that we need to go beyond declarations into more action, and that is what Francis has been mobilizing us to do. And so we want to have a multiplier effect and get more people involved, not just as not just in the civil society, work for free, out of our passion and commitment, but so that it creates careers and jobs, which I think would be useful for our young people.
Definitely. Thank you so much for
you're most welcome.
That you have shared with us, and we hope that our listeners, our viewers, our stakeholders are going to take all of these discussions into consideration. And like you said, all the declarations will be translated into actions, more actions on the ground to ensure quality nutrition for our school children and make the investments in education worth the while.
Yes.
This has been the African Nutrition Society podcast. My name is Helena. Many thanks to our sponsors. If you have any comments, kindly put them in our chat and we'll get back to you. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.